so much for coming today. It's been a long road to bring all of you together here on this topic. It's been exceedingly difficult to find a group of people who are able to speak about the Depression in Salinas, and it really reminded me as I went and called everyone and talked to them and about their families and how, oh, if only my mother had not passed away 2 years ago. It made me realize how important it is that we capture these stories now while the people that were there and who lived through these times are still with us. So today we're going to be speaking about the Depression in Salinas and the Okie migration. As you all know, many people are thinking about the Depression now. It was a very difficult time for many people. Some people say that Salinas didn't suffer much during the Depression. Those people are probably not people who came as part of what we called the Okies to this town. So we will be hearing a number of different stories today of the families of some of the people. Some of the people on our panel today were here personally, and some have to rely on their own family memories. So I'm going to introduce my panel here, and then I will turn it over to them, who will really be telling you their stories. My introduction will be very brief. We have Al Beggio here, and I invited Al. His family came to Salinas in the 1920s from the Philippines, and so his history is part of Salinas' history. I invited Al to talk about the Filipino population in Salinas. There were 30,000 Filipinos in California in the 1930s, and I don't know if everyone always realizes that. In Salinas, this was a time really before most Mexican people had come to Salinas in 1942 during the beginning of the Bracero program. So I also have Bill Ramsey here. His family arrived in 1930. And he was born in 1932 and grew up in the Alisal, and we'll speak about some of the experiences of his family. We also have Jim Gaddis here. He was born in Salinas in 1937, and he grew up in the Alisal, and he has been a community leader here in many ways, and currently he has a real estate investment firm in town. Then we have Joe and Doris Bragdon, who actually lived mostly in Monterey during the Depression, although they have been long-term residents of Salinas since. But Joe built a couple houses in Salinas, and Doris remembers driving through the Alisal at that time. She can share firsthand memories of what it was like there. Then we also have Larry Hosford here, who grew up in the Alisal, and his parents were Okies. And he's going to start us off by singing a song called Salinas that he wrote that gives you some of the spirit of the Alisal during those times.
This song is called Salinas, and I wrote it about 1974, I guess. Because I was in Santa Cruz and I had my feet up on some woman's coffee table. She said, "Where are you from?" Where did the Okies go when the dust began to blow? Did they go to Idaho? Maybe so. But most of the Okies I know, they went to Salinas, and that's where I'm from. I guess I'm a Okie. I was raised among them. Okies and Mexicans. Okies and Mexicans. California gets hot, California gets cold. If you're raised with Okies, you never get hungry or left alone when you're old. Back in Salinas, it's just as good as it comes. I guess I'm a Okie, raised among them. The right side of town is wrong, the wrong side of town is right. Put all the Okies in the U.S. Army, tell you we win all the fights back in Salinas. Just as tough as it comes. I guess I'm a Okie, 'cause I was raised among them.
Okies and Mexicans.
Okies and Mexicans are loud and proud. Of course you're bound to see fights. Alisal soul is hard to control, but at least they're claiming their rights back in Salinas. But that's where I'm from. I guess I'm a Okie or a Mexican.
You know, one of the good things about being an Okie is you can get away with cheap rhymes like that.
Now a horn is the thing that you blow, a drum is the thing that you beat. Send all the Okies and the Mexicans home, you would soon have nothing to eat. Not in Salinas. That's the rum's rum. I guess I'm a Okie or a Mexican. I was raised among them. I'd have to take each one.
I remember the beginning of the Depression. It started on October 29th, 1929. I was in junior high school. Some of my friends were delivering paper, so I got a job, and we got together after school. It was an evening paper, the Hollywood News. I was living in Hollywood at the time, and we'd spread our papers out and fold them up and put rubber bands around them and put them in our bikes. But I can remember that night, or the next night, opening the paper and hear big headlines. Wall Street takes a crash or something of the kind. And it was the first that I knew of it. To give you an idea of what the Depression was like, 25% of the workforce was unemployed. There were 15 million workers in the United States that were out of work. Now that may not seem like so many today but in those days the population was much smaller. Hoover, who was the president at the time, said it was just a minor thing. It'd be over in about 60 days, just hang in there. And he didn't realize that it was going to last over 10 years. Things were very, very bad. And then in the middle of it all came the dust storm. That's what brought the Okies out here. There was one's called a Black Sunday, when a terrible storm came along and just covered everything with dirt and dust. And so the people came out here in droves. And if you've read Steinbeck's book, The Grapes of Wrath, it gives a good picture of what it was like for those people.
My dad was a cotton farmer and raised cattle in Texas. Born in an old place called Dime Box. He ventured to La Mesa in Littlefield, Texas, and during the way, he and my mom had 9 children. And we had a good life. And then the Depression hit. And my older sister wrote a journal about seeing all of our equipment being auctioned off in Texas. Not too unlike today, in some cases. And so after the equipment was auctioned off, my dad had a Star, S-T-A-R, automobile. And my sister wrote a journal about he owed some money on it. So he paid off the car and bought a new Model B Ford. And now I want you to picture something. Wherever your family has come from, however large it is, 9 kids, mom and dad, 2 months from Texas to California. How far down can you get on your luck before you take a look and say, well, anything's better than where I am? It did turn out that my grandfather had moved out here because my step-grandmother was ill in Texas, and so they moved out here in the very early 30s. Along the way, from Texas to California, they stopped and picked cotton. They camped out. People came along and helped them with food. And even though the car was new when they left Texas, 2 months it became older, the car would break down, they'd run out of water. And there were so many people in that car that in the hills of New Mexico and Arizona, they'd have to get out of the car and push the car over the hills. So whatever you think your luck is down, and it can't get much worse, and I think about it all the time. I think about that trip that my family had out here.
And my family settled in what used to be the Portal Ranch on Blanco Road, 90 Blanco Road, along with the Nesson family who owned most of the property along Blanco Road. And my parents were related to different stories about the Depression, and they said it was really, really difficult. And it wasn't for the extended family that were people that were from the same island helping out, you know, sharing their food and even delivering their babies because they were, you know, they didn't have any medical coverage whatsoever.
Well, I wasn't going to drop any names until I heard Joel Bragdon talk about Beverly Hills and Hollywood. But I'm going to tell you, my parents were from Paris, and Paris felt the Depression. Of course, it was Paris, Arkansas. And they came here in 1935, and I was the youngest of 4 boys. I was born here in 1937. And we grew up all of my childhood in the Alisal area. And I was always referred to as the prune picker, and they were always the cotton pickers. So I took a lot of stick over the years of being born in California. But my parents came here for the same reason that everyone else did. They came here looking for opportunity. And there was simply no opportunity to speak of in Arkansas where they were. My grandfather had a farm and a very large family, and they all farmed that space, and there was just no opportunity beyond bare subsistence to keep themselves going. And so my father was the oldest of a large family, and he came out, I think a brother, one of my uncles, and they found some work during a season and somehow upgraded the car and went back in the off season, and this pattern repeated itself over the next 6 years, and each time they came back, another family member came with them. Every time there was an empty seat, someone else came back with them. And my grandfather and grandmother finally surrendered in 1941 and moved out here themselves because their whole family had moved out for the same reasons.